Howdy, it's Kyle with a video going over the top news stories of the past month that are related to geography. And this is something new that I'm going to be doing on this channel. So the first of each month, I'll be posting a video talking about the top news stories of the previous month that have something to do with geography. So the stuff I'll be talking about in this video is stuff that happened in January of 2020. So let me know if this is something that interests you, and I'll keep compiling the top news stories about geography of the previous month. I'm going to start with a news story that's been huge worldwide, and that's the Australian bushfires. I'm sure you've heard about this. This has been major news across the planet, and for good reason, because these bushfires are just tremendously huge. But for this video, I'm not going to be talking about some of the stories involved with it, so not the deaths and damage and destruction kind of stuff, but just some of the things that have to do with the geography of these bushfires. I'm going to first talk about the huge size of the fires themselves. More than 33,000 square miles have been burned. The part of the country that's been affected the most is the southeast, so primarily the states of New South Wales, Victoria, and Queensland. And New South Wales is where Sydney is, and that's the most populous state in the country. But to put in perspective just how large these fires are, it's about the same size as Indiana, Maine, or South Carolina. So imagine the entire state of Indiana on fire. Of course, the fires aren't one big contiguous fire, but that is how much land has been burned. Compare that to the 2018 California wildfire season, which was the worst wildfire season for the state in recorded history. And there were 2,800 square miles burned during that season. And that covered a total of 1.7% of all the land in California. The Australian bushfires were 12 times as large and would have burned 20% of the land in California. Something else worth noting is that when people think about the climate of Australia, they're probably thinking about dry and desert and some of the outback kind of stuff. But the southeast part of the country is not that part of Australia. So the climate of the area that's been affected by the fires is pretty similar to the climate of the southeastern US. It's got pretty hot, humid summers, and it rains every month of the year. So the big fire season in the US is the late summer and fall, where you have very dry conditions throughout the entire region. The last thing I'm going to mention about the fires is you may have seen this map that's been going around the internet. But unfortunately, it's wrong. It overstates what the fires are. It makes it look like the entire continent is on fire, but it's all pretty much confined to the southeastern part of the country. So it is a huge number of fires, burning a ton of acres, but it isn't throughout the entire country. The tropical parts of the country in the north are not seeing the big, huge fires you're seeing in the southeast. So when you see this map, just know that it's wrong. I don't know where it came from, but the entire perimeter, the whole coastal area of the country is not on fire. The next topic I want to discuss is just the sheer amount of volcanic activity that was going around the Pacific Ring of Fire in January. It was an incredibly busy month for the number of eruptions. The most notable of which was the Taal volcano in the Philippines. And this is a huge eruption that started on January 12th. And the Philippines is certainly no stranger to volcanic eruptions. There are 21 active volcanoes in the island chain. There was a tremendous amount of asphalt. There were areas with near zero visibility. It was rainy, so the rain turned the ash to mud. You take a look at some of these photos, it looks like they're in black and white, but Philippines is a tropical country. This would all be lush and green. So imagine Florida or the Great Smoky Mountains or the rainforest of the Pacific Northwest being completely gray. There were also 44 earthquakes over a span of 48 hours. Now, none of these were huge earthquakes, but these were 44 earthquakes you could feel, so almost one every hour for the course of 2 days. That's pretty crazy. At the exact same time that the Taal volcano was erupting, La Cumbre volcano in the Galapagos was erupting as well. And the Galapagos is most known for having a lot of unique species that occur nowhere else on Earth. This was a significantly smaller eruption, but again, it was going on at the exact same time. A couple of days before the Taal volcano eruption in the Philippines, El Popo volcano in Mexico erupted. This one is about 40 miles southeast of Mexico City, so it affects a large population. This is the most active volcano in Mexico, so the people that live there are used to it erupting, and some of the earthquakes are associated with it. But again, just how busy January was in terms of volcanic eruptions, this one was going on at the same time. Also in January, Anak Krakatau volcano in Indonesia erupted, and the name literally means son of Krakatoa. So when people think about volcanoes, they might not know much about it, but they might have heard of Krakatoa. And another one was the Shashaldan volcano in the Aleutian Islands of Alaska. This one is a pretty active volcano. It's erupted 24 times since 1775, and the last was in 1999. But it had to wait until this busy January 2020 to erupt, so just, again, so many volcanoes erupting at the same time. And this is after a major eruption occurred on White Island off of New Zealand in December of 2019. This was a major eruption that caused 19 deaths. So even though it was in December, it's still part of this big flurry that's been going on for the past 6 weeks or so. The Pacific Ring of Fire right now is pretty upset. It's belching a lot of lava. And one last bit of volcanic news for January is on the island of Mayotte, which is a small island off the coast of East Africa. Between Africa and Madagascar, it's a French territory. A whole new volcano was born. Now, the volcano was actually quote-unquote born in 2018, but it was this past month that it was confirmed as Earth's newest volcano. For the past couple of years, geologists have been hearing seismic hums as far as 7,000 miles away, but weren't quite sure exactly where it was coming from. Although there has been volcanic activity on Mayotte before, it's been 4,000 years since the last eruption. This new baby volcano is 2 miles underwater, and it's the deepest and largest magma reservoir in the upper mantle of the Earth. This magma reservoir is abruptly emptying, and the island itself has moved several inches in that time. So an island has moved several inches because of this volcano. That's pretty crazy. And now for some news closer to home and less disastrous. It was a pretty interesting year for geyser eruptions at Yellowstone National Park. Steamboat Geyser, which is the tallest geyser in the entire world, had a record number of eruptions in 2019. It erupted 48 times, which shatters the previous record of 32, which is interesting because Yellowstone as a whole had less geyser eruptions in 2019 than usual, and there was also overall less seismic activity throughout the park. And yet the tallest geyser within the park had by far the largest number of eruptions on record. Staying in the same region, there's been some pretty interesting activity at the Great Salt Lake in Utah. In January, these very rare mirabilite formations, basically these giant salt mounds, were shown poking out of the surface of the Salt Lake. And this has never been documented before in the Great Salt Lake. It's usually something that only occurs in the Arctic areas. It requires temperatures below freezing, and even in the Arctic, they're very rare. They're formed as deposits that come from sulfate-rich springs, but it's usually below the surface, and the mirabilite doesn't have a chance to form above the surface. But the water level at the Great Salt Lake has been going down. With more people moving there, more agricultural production going on in the region, there's a lot more water being used. It's being diverted before it even gets to the lake. So the deposits are able to form these large mounds above the lake's surface. But they're only going to be there temporarily because once the temperature gets above freezing, probably pretty soon, they're going to go away. But if you live near there, check them out now. This might be the only chance you ever get to see them. In other natural news in the western U.S., we have a brand new national park. White Sands in the southeastern portion of New Mexico is now a national park. For many years, it was White Sands National Monument, but in January, it became White Sands National Park. White Sands is a pretty cool place. It's the largest gypsum dune field in the entire world. And it's a pretty interesting place to visit as well. You can kind of climb around on the dunes and slide down them. It's pretty neat. But now that it's a national park instead of a national monument, it's going to have a little bit of a different funding setup. It's also going to have a lot more visitation. A lot of folks get these national park guides and they want to see all the national parks, but things that are national monuments don't show up in those guides and are often skipped. But now that it's a national park, you're going to see a lot more people wanting to visit it if you're a national park collector, which will probably bring a little bit of an economic boost to the region, which right now is almost entirely dependent on the oil and natural gas sector. So now I want to mention a couple of interesting stories regarding human geography in the U.S. Loving County, Texas, which is right near White Sands, right along the New Mexico border, has been the least populous county in the U.S. for quite some time. At the 2000 census, there were 67 people in the entire county. At the 2010 census, there were 82 people in the entire county. However, at the 2020 census, there's expected to be more than 150 people. So it'll no longer be the least populous county in the country, it'll be the second least populous county in the country. And that might not seem like a big deal going from 80 to 150 people or so in 10 years, but that's a big deal. Imagine living in a tiny community of 82 people. Literally everybody knows everybody else, and then the population doubles over the course of several years. So if you live there, that's a whole bunch of new people you're going to get to know, for better or for worse. It's pretty interesting because I've been to this county. There's only one actual town where everybody in that county lives, but there are 3 ghost towns. But the reason why people are moving there is again because of the oil and natural gas sector, which is booming in that part of Texas. And in other news regarding the census, there's a whole new ethnic group that's going to be counted for the first time in 2020. Sikhs will now have an opportunity to check a box and say that I am Sikh living in the US. Sikhs are an ethnic group that hail primarily from northern India and eastern Pakistan, and they're kind of like the Basque in Europe in many ways, and that the population is split between Spain and France, but they never had a country of their own. Oftentimes, Sikhs are confused with people that come from other parts of India or Pakistan, or maybe Muslims or Iranians or Arabs, but they are a separate ethnic group. Now, with Sikhs being officially considered a separate ethnic group, people might become a little more educated about them. And that's it. Those are just some of the things I wanted to talk about that happened across the US and across the world relating to geography. Let me know if this is something that interests you and something you want to see me to keep doing each month. And I think it's very interesting, some of this nerdy type stuff. And most of the news you're going to see is going to be political or it's going to be celebrity gossip kind of stuff. There really isn't much else in the news these days. So I think some of these stories about geography and geology and things have to do with Earth and atmospheric sciences are just really cool, even though they don't get very much press. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up to let me know you approve, and subscribe to this channel if you're interested in hearing more about U.S. geography, travel, road tripping across the U.S., just things about geography from a nerdy perspective. So yeah, thanks for watching. Geography King, signing out.